Hey, welcome. Today, we're going to talk about something that's totally reshaping our digital world, decentralization. It's this massive shift, moving power away from the big tech giants and their central servers and putting it back into our hands. So let's dive in and figure out what this really means.
I mean, really think about it. Every time you use an app, every time you browse a website, or, make a payment online, who's actually pulling the strings? Who owns all that data? That question right there is exactly why we need to talk about decentralization.
You see, pretty much every digital system is built in one of two ways. On one hand, you've got the centralized model, where a single company or entity is in charge. Think about your favorite social media site. If their main server goes down, poof, the whole thing is offline for everybody. That's what we call a single point of failure. But on the other hand, you have decentralization, which spreads all that control and data out, making the entire system way more resilient.
Okay, so to really get our heads around this, let's strip it back to the absolute basics. What does it actually mean when we say a system is decentralized?
At its very heart, decentralization is just a transfer of power. It's that simple. So instead of one boss, one CEO, or one company holding all the data and making all the rules, that power gets handed over to a whole network of users. There's no single person in charge anymore. The network itself is the boss. So why is this such a big deal? Well, for starters, it creates what we call a trustless environment. You don't have to put your faith in a company anymore because the rules are just baked right into the code for everyone to see. And because you get rid of that single point of failure we talked about, the system becomes incredibly tough. And get this, with no central off switch, it's also almost impossible for any one person to censor it.
That all sounds amazing in theory, right? But how in the world does it actually work? Let's take a look at the blueprint and see how these systems are actually put together.
You can kind of think of it in three simple steps. First, a bunch of independent computers, which we call nodes, all connect to each other to form a network. They're all peers. Second, the information isn't stored in just one place. It gets copied and spread out across tons of these nodes. And third, and this is the real magic right here, all of those nodes have to constantly agree on the true state of the system. They do this through a process called consensus. And that brings us to the secret sauce, the consensus mechanism. This is basically the rule book that lets a network with no leader agree on what's true. It's the engine that makes sure every single participant has the exact same version of the records, which keeps the whole thing secure and perfectly in sync. Now, there are a couple of famous ways networks reach consensus. You've probably heard of proof of work. That's what Bitcoin uses. It's kind of like a huge computational race that's incredibly secure, but yeah, it uses a ton of energy. To fix that, proof of stake came along. Instead of racing, participants lock up their own crypto. They stake it for a chance to validate transactions. It keeps things secure while being way, way more energy efficient. You know, this whole idea of decentralization didn't just appear out of nowhere. It actually has a pretty fascinating history, and it all started with a really simple but powerful idea: peer-to-peer networking. A peer-to-peer or P2P network is pretty much exactly what it sounds like. Instead of one big central server dishing out files, the individual computers, the peers, just connect and share stuff directly with each other. Every single person on the network is both a user and a server at the same time. And the journey of this tech is awesome. It started with really early messaging systems like Usenet. Then, in 1999, Napster made P2P a household name with file sharing. A decade later, Bitcoin blew everyone's minds by showing how a P2P network could create a brand new form of money. And then, in 2015, Ethereum took the next giant leap by making this decentralized money programmable. And that programmability comes from something called a smart contract. A smart contract is just an agreement, but instead of being on paper, its terms are written directly into code that lives on the blockchain. It runs all by itself when the right conditions are met, following a super simple if-then logic. No middlemen, no lawyers, just pure code doing what it was told to do, automatically. So we've got these cool decentralized networks, and now we've got these programmable smart contracts. When you put those two things together, well, you get the building blocks for a whole new digital economy, all powered by things called dApps. A dApp, which is short for decentralized application, is pretty much like any app on your phone, but there's one huge difference. The back end, the brains of the whole operation, isn't running on some company's private server. It's running as a smart contract on a decentralized network like Ethereum. Now, building these dApps comes with a really interesting set of trade-offs.
On the plus side, you get things like zero downtime and total censorship resistance, which is incredible. But on the flip side, they can be trickier to update, and sometimes they can get bogged down by network congestion, and let's be honest, the user experience isn't always as slick as what we're used to, at least not yet.
So what can you actually do with this stuff? Oh man, the possibilities are just exploding. We're seeing things like DAOs, which are basically organizations with no boss. We're seeing supply chains where you can track an item all the way from the factory to your door. And we're seeing games where you truly own your in-game items instead of just renting them from the game company. Of course, this technology is still super young, and there are some pretty major hurdles the entire community is working like crazy to solve. But what's cool is that these challenges are the very things driving the next wave of innovation.
The first big one is scalability, right? As millions and hopefully billions of people start using these networks, how do you make sure they don't just grind to a halt or become way too expensive to use? Figuring out how to scale up without sacrificing security is like the holy grail of this space right now.
The second challenge is something called interoperability. I mean, as all these different blockchains keep popping up, how do we get them to talk to each other? This quote just nails it. If you own a digital item, but it's trapped on one network, what good is it? True digital ownership means you can take your stuff with you wherever you go. And last but not least, there's governance. And this is a huge one. If there's no CEO, no board of directors, who gets to decide on upgrades? How does a network actually evolve and improve over time when there's nobody in charge? Well, the solution that's starting to emerge is this idea of decentralized governance. More and more networks are building systems where if you hold the network's token, you get a vote. So the community itself, the actual users and stakeholders, get to collectively decide on the future of the platform. It's pretty amazing. And really, that brings us to the final big picture thought here. This whole shift, it's not just about technology. It's a philosophical question. As more and more of our lives go digital, we have to ask ourselves, who should be writing the rules? Should it be a few powerful companies, or should it be the communities of people who actually use these systems? That's the core question decentralization is forcing us all to think about. Thanks so much for watching. For more explainers just like this one, make sure to check out the CodeAccessHub channel on YouTube.